And it happened at Disney, right? Like I think there was a little boy who was walking by and the mother went to save him. Like, it was a horrible thing. And they shouldn't have, I would think at Disney, like allowed alligators to live in these ponds. They should move them to Gatorland. And it's kind of odd that they were there. But you know what? If it looks like a wild pond, you don't let your kid that looks like prey walk next to the water. We need to recognize that we don't live in owning the world. I mean, we are sharing this world, and you of all people, like having moved to the, rural world, I became quite aware of that, right?
No, and people come up here and they buy this cabin in the middle of nowhere and they're letting their little lapdog run around outside, and there's giant crow or hawks tortoises. That's not a good idea,
And the hawk will pick it up.
It's a new way of living and I'm trying to get used to it. One park poodle's half an ounce of an idiot. Ordered a Manhattan and they call me a city, yeah. At first I hurt my feelings, but it's kinda got a ring to it. When you move to the country, they can tell when you're new to it. I'm looking at a place, but I'm trying to keep fitting in. It takes too long to be a local, so for now I'm a cityite.
I'm Matt Zucker, and this is Cityite, learning to live and love life in the Hudson Valley. As you heard in the season debut, Reveries, I'm trying to recenter myself on what I love about the Hudson Valley. Culture, nature, and yes, animals. So what better person to talk to about the science of nature and wildlife than Jessica Morgenthau, friend of the family and host of the fabulous new podcast, Resilience Gone Wild. Each episode, Jessica tackles what we can learn from the natural world to be more resilient and live better. It's fun, interesting, and addictive. I was recently a guest on sort of 2 episodes. The first was more of a narrative about my experience going from the city mouse to country mouse, a storybook telling of our move upstate and what we found. And the second episode was a one-to-one interview with me. Both had the theme of using laughter to adapt and be resilient. I think this was a good theme for me and our experience. Brian and I have been laughing every day since 2014 when we started. So today, Jessica comes on the show and we get to really talk and laugh about the awe of nature, what we can learn from various animals in the Hudson Valley, including chickens, and a reminder that animals themselves are a community, that we are sharing the world with them. And then, perhaps most importantly, why you shouldn't leave your small children or tiny lapdogs out in your yard as prey for hawks. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, Matt.
Thanks for coming on Cityite.
Yay, I'm so excited to be here.
Well, I know I was just on your show, so now we've turned the microphones around.
Yeah, it was so much fun. We laughed so much that I was like, yay, I get to do a whole laughing session with Matt again. That was fun.
I know. We are going to. And, just so listeners know is that we met during the pandemic. We were in Florida, and I was there for the pandemic, and I was a Floridiot for a few months, and you lived there part-time. And we met at your friend and my sister's friend, Cecile's house.
Yeah. And I got to meet Brian. And I actually spent a whole ton of time talking to Brian. And it was so much fun. I was so sad that you guys did not decide that being a Floridiot was your
I know.
Place.
It wasn't for us. Although, talking to you, and because you live on Turtle Island, like Singer Island, right?
Yeah.
We started, this is before you had the podcast.
Yeah.
It did pique our interest because we never think of Florida as this kind of, even though obviously it is, this natural wonder of all this wildlife and science.
So as you put it at the end of every one of your podcasts, come visit.
Yeah.
I don't know if I said that right. Like, come visit.
Yeah, that's it.
It was beautiful. Come visit. So, come visit.
All right, I'll come visit.
And by the way, all I've been thinking about all day is that I need to start a Floridiot podcast. So you need to franchise.
Oh, please. Cityite. Yeah.
So we can do this in every place.
Oh, that's a great idea. I could finally make money on this thing.
Good luck.
So that was Florida. But you also have a connection to the Hudson Valley.
I
So
do.
maybe start with that.
Most of my life was Hudson Valley. I grew up in Manhattan. That's not Hudson Valley, but the Hudson River does go through the Hudson Valley. So I was really connected to that. And then I spent 20 years raising my kids in Armonk, which is in Westchester County. But I was thinking about like in between, and I was actually Googling what is Hudson Valley. And it goes all the way up to Albany and Troy and Rensselaer. And I went to RPI, which is part of Hudson Valley. And it is. I was so excited. And I worked in Albany also while I was interning at the Egg. I don't know if Ray knows the Egg. Is it still there in Albany? The legislative thing that looks like an egg, the building?
Oh, that structure. Yeah. It's very cool.
And I learned to ski in the Catskills. So, Bel Air and Hunter. And I try to get up. I go to Beacon. I go to Storm King. We golf in Croton, which is northern Westchester. So I am such a Hudson Valley kid.
Yeah, that's great. So then how did you get into science? I mean, listeners probably have heard me on your show, or they should discover it, Resilience in the Wild. And it's got a whole take on I think it makes science very accessible, but it also teaches us humans what we can learn from nature, animals, but there's a science bent to it too. So how did you get into that?
I guess it started with growing up loving science. So I went to Rensselaer RPI and I was just a very poor scientist. Like it just wasn't one of these geeky, really good science thinkers. So I started studying the impact of science and technology on society, which really it like flowed through with like, how do our behaviors change based on what we do, how we live, the energy we put out, all different aspects. So I studied that for years and worked in it for years in many different aspects between technology and religion and marketing. And I dabbled as a consultant. I did like a 2-year project for Cargill, which was actually kind of my first entree into, the city kid, literally. Like the only time I ever met farm animals was at the children's zoo. And I was working on the agricultural business of one of the largest agricultural companies in the world.
That's hardcore.
That's like total consulting, right? Like you send somebody who knows absolutely nothing and they figure it out. So I was sitting in farms with farmers and near silos in the middle of absolutely nowhere in Iowa and Nebraska and like all these cool places.
Oh, wow.
And I think, like thinking back, I think that all connected me. And we were talking about the science of agriculture. And at the time, I had gotten my MBA not that long before, so I was all about the business side of it, and I was all into seed science and mono farming and scale and all that. And now it goes to a completely different place now that I'm really focused on nature and the environment and doing some reading and learning about the Hudson Valley. It's much more small farms and regenerative and sustainability and family farms, and it's just such a different place that feels so much more comfortable to me. So
I love learning about it too. I mean, even those words you just used, I've only learned recently, like mono farming is like pigs or chickens. It's like one thing at a time, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's just like kind of myopia on it too. And I'm
system.
Like, right. No system. And while regenerative is more like, there's a farm up here, Hardy Roots, and there's a pig over here, there's chickens running around, there's vegetables, the soil's being moved around, and it's integrated. So that's regenerative, right?
It's a system that regenerates itself. So
that's good. Regenerative, good. Mono, bad.
Exactly. And I don't know, I recommended a while ago the film The Biggest Little Farm, which tells this great story of it. And you see the difference. And not to spoiler alert, in the film, you see that the mono farm doesn't do too well in the forest fires. And the regenerative farm is resilient. It's got deeper roots and connections between things that take care of each other and regrow. It's a completely different world. So it's so beautiful that you live in the Hudson Valley where, this is sort of more of the mentality that people are talking about,
Yeah, it feels really natural. It feels almost silly to do just a goat. Why would you just do goats? Like get a donkey.
Right. I mean, you've got your donkey that takes care of the goats and then the goats take care of the sheep. Like everybody's got to be in the game.
Everybody's got a job.
Everybody's got a job. Yeah. I was thinking of your garden where you had the flowers versus the vegetables, but you
Oh yes, that was very important. Flowers versus vegetables. Yeah. And everybody won except me because I waited too long to pick up the kale. So what was the dotted line to get to your podcast?
So it's called Resilience Gone Wild, and it's all about what we can learn from nature because let's be real. I mean, this earth has been around for billions of years, right? And we humans have been around a lot less than that. And all these species that we're surrounded by have adapted and survived and thrived for millions, or turtles, like sea turtles, like 100 million years. It's so like living in a vacuum to think that we know better than what we, and that we've got all the answers when they're all in front of us. And in reality, so much of what we do is biomimicry and learning, but we don't share that. Like we think like if you, and it's funny. Recently I read an article about how Ozempic, which is like huge, right? Like the glutides, whatever they're called, was actually learned not a few decades ago, not that long ago, from a scientist, researcher who was looking at the Gila monster in New Mexico, where it's like the only place it lives, that only ate a few times a year. And it's such a common story that no one knows that, right? Everybody thinks that there were some like genius scientists who just figured it out from scratch. But pretty much most of the time, nature had some lessons that they offered that led to whatever came next. And whether it's architecture or art or any sort of design or whatever, it comes from nature. So I just thought that was the coolest thing. And if we're doing it because it works and we've seen it work. So if you think about, like the honeycomb structure of a beehive that is so symmetrical and so well designed, the spider web, there's no end to the examples of what we've learned to ways that nature has been resilient that we can learn from. So I just wanted to send that message. Like I wanted to share that awe and joy and beauty and a way to give people metaphor for tools for the resilience tools for their life. So think of a sea turtle when you think about how you're beating yourself up for making a mistake. No, it's not a mistake. You're learning from it, just like the sea turtle did when the mama dragged herself up on the sand to build a nest. And it was like, no, wrong place. This isn't quite right. It wasn't a mistake. It was just trying something and taking risks and learning so that you can do it better the next time.
This would be very new for me because I always think about, and this season I'm trying to emphasize getting back to appreciating what's around you. But this is a step beyond it because this is, okay, look at the goats, but what can we learn from their behaviors? Or the spider, so shriek at the spider, and then what can you learn? So what should I look for to learn in what I see around me? Because this is like taking it to the next level.
Yeah. So when you think of metaphor, the interesting part about it is that we all see things differently. So if you look at a sea turtle, you might see that this represents protection. There's this amazing protective armor that I need to have around me. But others might, and a sea turtle doesn't do this, but others might be like, okay, it's a place to go and hide and be, and go into yourself and be focused on yourself and get some chillax, So the challenge and the opportunity is to watch nature. And I've talked to a few people like 5 minutes at a time with no distractions. Like don't take a picture, don't like answer.
Don't take a picture.
Right, don't take a picture, right? Just 5 minutes. You can take a picture after 5 minutes. Somebody else said 20 minutes because at 20 minutes, you're watching not just the way it looks or like single sensory experiences, but you're seeing behavior. You're seeing how nature is acting within connection with other, because things change, things move, even whether you're watching.
Hard for the city people listening, slow down and stop.
Right.
20 minutes.
You do nothing for 5 minutes at a time in New York, right? Like, or in the city. So that is a huge change in mindset.
I like it.
Yeah. So, what's the resilience of I listened to some of your episodes about the animals and like the cows. One of the farmers was talking about the cows. And if you watch long enough, and he said all he wants to do is sit and watch the cows. And he doesn't have enough time. He doesn't make enough time to just sit and watch the cows. But when he does, he sees the hierarchy and some cows babysitting for other cows and some people relieving each. I know, like you've had 100 1,000 episodes, but those are the ones
No, but I haven't talked about that, about the dynamics within them.
But he was talking about if you watch for 5 minutes, you kind of just see all the different colors of the cows,
Right,
maybe, right?
right.
But 20 minutes, you're like, how come that cow is talking to that cow and that cow just ate and now the other cow's eating and now the new one is watching the babies. It's so like 20 minutes, and that's where to go with what can you learn from that, right? The lesson of the cows and the babysitting for each other is we live in community, right? So if you can put yourself out there to be there for someone else, they'll be there for you. It's a relationship. You have to offer yourself up to give as well as receive.
What's a terrible lesson, do you think? Like a really bad behavior. It doesn't have to be a snake or anything, but when someone does something bad, like I've seen sheep where one gets left behind, and it's not the black sheep, like the bad sheep or the rebellious one. They forgot one of them, or he's slow,
I was just reading Cy Montgomery's new book. Cy is an author. She wrote Soul of an Octopus. She's on one of my episodes. I'm just a huge fan of Cy's. And she just wrote a new book about chickens, which, yeah, you would love. And it's not that long, actually. It's a pretty short book. I listened to it yesterday. And she gives the answer to your question. So, the reality is that nature isn't always kind to each other either, right? It's survival of the fittest. It's dog eat dog, whatever. And the chickens, there was a family of chickens that somebody had in their farm and they loved their chicken. They would cuddle with the chickens. Like these were like chickens who they really connected with, right? They did. No, really. They were like, if you want to have a relationship with a chicken, pick the chicken up and hug the chicken. That's the answer. So there was this one sort of runt of the litter. And it turned out there was like a hole in its brain, its skull. Like it was really a weak link, right? But it was adorable. And it was surviving. And some animal got to it and almost killed it. And it turns out that if a chicken sees blood, for whatever reason, and we would have to guess what the reason is, whether it's to avoid, a hawk smelling the blood and coming and getting other ones, or whatever, the lesson is you might learn, they will peck the hurt chicken till it's dead. I mean, they don't want that chicken around. Yeah. So this was their friend though. So this family saved the chicken and that's a story, but we're animals, they're animals. We shouldn't pretend, right? We do that too. Like alligators, are known to lions. I was in Botswana and the lions will eat the babies if they think they're not theirs because they only want their gene pool. And that's a really common thing, right? So you've got these crazy, adorable little tiny lion cubs, right? And they kill them. I mean, the reality is at least they do it for survival of the species and only so much food around. So you have to make sure that there's enough food for everybody or everybody's hungry. So you kill off the weak ones, that kind of thing. It's interesting.
Do you have any wildlife that you really hate? I freaking snakes. I know there's good snakes, but I don't think so. Bears are big in the Catskills, and I'm on the other side of the river, so we don't really get bears as much. I probably would have strong feelings pro or con bears if I were on the west side of the river, but I don't, so I feel dispassionate. But do you have any things you feel strongly about, against? Or
I have to say, people are really afraid of alligators, especially on golf courses and stuff. I think they're the coolest thing.
Come out and grab you by the...
But they don't. They're so cool. And I just
come on. You always read these terrible stories of this woman jogger running by and then he
But
reaches
it's one story. That's the psychology issue, right? There's the science. People pick the one story. It's the single story problem, right? And then it grows and it's the common thing that's going to happen is the alligator is going to jump out. And it happened at Disney, right? I think there was a little boy who was walking by and the mother went to save him. It was a horrible thing. And they shouldn't have, I would think at Disney, allowed alligators to live in these ponds. They should move them to Gatorland. And it's kind of odd that they were there, but you know what? If it looks like a wild pond, you don't let your kid that looks like prey walk next to the water. We need to recognize that we don't live in owning the world. I mean, we are sharing this world, and you of all people, like having moved to the, rural world, became quite aware of that, right?
Well, and people come up here and they buy this cabin in the middle of nowhere and they're letting their little lapdog run around outside, and there's giant crow or hawks.
Yeah.
That's not a good idea,
Yeah. And the hawk will pick it up. Yeah. You know what? It's a funny question when you say, is there anything that I don't love in nature? And I actually haven't met anything yet. It could be the ugliest animal. It could be the smelliest animal. It could be the scariest, but I just have created a different relationship. Like when I'm just start with awe and curiosity and respect. So the first place to go is, I grew up in the city, right? We think we're king and queen of the universe and get out of my way. Like this is my space. I got stuff to do. I got places to go. I got things to buy, deals to make. So it's change of mindset, right? Like we are in this together. We are in community now. The pace is here. You're not going to change the pace. Like when in Rome, right? Like when in rural, when in cute little town.
And I want people to enjoy it. Like on your show, we talked about laughter and how that was, I didn't even realize until I talked to you that was my coping mechanism. The way I adapted is by laughing at all the things I didn't know and that surprised me. And it worked. Like it made me happier. And it was a good technique.
Yeah. But I think what came before the laughter, if you stop and sort of process it, was awe. Like when you talk about the goats, like you want you to, or the spider, right?
Like what? Well, first of all, it's like, what is that?
Yeah.
Like, is that a goat or a sheep? Like, what's the difference between a ewe and a, there's all those variations. Like, I don't get it, and then it's like, oh, wow, that's impressive. They're hilarious. And then they do stuff and then you have reaction. I think you're right. I think it starts with noticing. It's just like when you're driving down a country road and all of a sudden this flock of ducks will just block the road, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to create like a city tour where I have people from the city come up. I drive them around in a van, but I time it. They don't know, but I work it out with the farmers. And at 12:06, when I turn around the bend, they let the ducks out. And all of a sudden we have to stop and photograph. Oh, what happened? It's an accident, but it's not. Like I went planned, spontaneity.
Absolutely. That is so funny. I'm there. So I'll buy the first ticket.
More than $20, right? Yeah.
I think that we city people are living we're not living life fully. Like we don't have those moments of awe. Like we don't have those moments of magic and of curiosity. We're just doing.
If you're in the cement jungle, though, when you do see a bird, when you do see something natural, the view of the ocean, I do think people take notice, and they do. So I think there is, but it's rare. But I bet it's impactful.
Yeah, and it's more rare because we're always on our phone, right? Like how often, and it's not just city people, like I'm sure it's country people too, but like how often does somebody say, oh my God, did you see the bird? And you're like, I was on my phone. Right, oh wait, let me take a picture. Where is it? If you're gonna live in a beautiful place like where you live or where I live, what's the point in being here and not bringing this into your life as fully as you can? And learning from it.
Get to see the Florida angle. Do you see the same with your podcast, Resilience Gone Wild? If somebody wanted to go start to listen right now, which they should.
Thank you.
Where do you think people should start if they're curious and they're not like scientists? It's like country like me. Like which episode? You've been doing this now for a season, right?
We started in September, so we're on. We decided the season would be like the school year season.
Yeah, but you've done a lot of episodes.
Yeah, we have. We've dropped 21, and we're ready through. We're like gone through June, and then we're thinking about doing pets during the summer, like something marine oriented pets. Yeah, pet ducks, pet whatever, but pets. Because I think it's so you have this duck versus geese thing in your. Like
again, I always forget there's a difference between.
Yes, you seem to recognize it when you see them, though. So I would say start with City at the episode with Matt because it's just, and the one before it, like the format is. And a number of them.
Right, you did my narrative first. You did City Mouse becoming Country Mouse.
Which was just a funny
thing.
And
it was like a storybook. It was like a children's storybook.
Yeah.
And then you interviewed me the next week.
And it talked about how humor is a resilience tool. And then I got to chat with Matt and we lived it. It was great.
People will learn more from the first one.
They're both great. And then I'm doing like these up close and personals with all these really interesting people I meet from all over the world who have great stories about how a moment in nature changed them. And we can all have those moments if we just stop, right? Like the moment, each one of those moments that you shared on City and that I made into the City Mouse, Country Mouse, the spider in the shower, the bat flying overhead, the goat, the donkey, each one of those times when you like completely interacted with that animal. So
that's great.
And then start from one. Honestly, like the first episode is about not making mistakes and owning that you can learn instead of shame yourself, and that is how we should be living. So start with the number one. Yeah, everybody loves sea turtles.
Yeah, and one last question.
Yeah,
the difference between a turtle and a tortoise.
Right. So a turtle does not walk on its legs. A tortoise is land-based and walks, so it has It has like hands. And a turtle swims and has...
Oh, that's so much easier than the geese-duck thing.
There's a few other differences, but that's the gist. So if it has flippers, it's a turtle.
Legs, land, swim, got it.
Yes, right. And, I mean, it's a little confusing because there are turtles that live in ponds in Hudson Valley for sure, or in the river, whatever, that come out of the water. And, most of them are actually tortoises and they walk, but they also swim. Like you can't come out and be comfortable if you're a turtle, but you can come out and go in if you're a tortoise. Anyway, so I hope I have that all right.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Down in the valley, moved up from the city. It's a new way of living and I'm trying to get used to it. 1 part poodles, half an ounce of an idiot. Ordered a Manhattan and they call me a city, At first it hurt my feelings, but it's kinda got a ring to it. When you move to the country, they can tell when you're new to it. I'm looking at a place, but I'm trying to keep fitting in. It takes too long to be a local, so for now I'm a city.